I had an interesting game last night, well, to a point. It was against Simon Warman, who I've played actually before in a British Championship, and he absolutely crushed me in that British Championship game, so I was a bit wary about playing him. But he had lost the previous week when we were at home to Hendon Chess Club. So this was against Hendon Chess Club in their new home venue, which was a little bit cramped and a little bit noisy actually during the game. But anyway, I hope there's some instructive points. I think, abstracting from the game, I think I'm myself discerning more between quality pieces, what that really means. Pieces that can have temporary high quality or temporary low quality, not just superficially looking at what pieces can be considered high or low quality, but distinguishing the permanence of that, permanent or temporary, and how you can use that effect that you want to sort of sometimes do something radical or positional sacrifice, whatever, to exploit your temporary strong pieces or the opponent's temporary bad pieces. So anyway, I played d4, and after c5 the scene is almost becoming set with the pawn structure, the pawns that the soul of chess, Philidor, after d5, that black will try and make use of the e5 square later, unless black wants to play the check Bononi, which is very popular. So e5 now would disable the use of that square for a knight later. But no, d6 was played, and actually, in all my experience, I don't remember many people playing this opening against me as white. So I have a choice to sort of steer into King's Indian defence waters, maybe if he's going to fianchetto, or even I think e6 is going into Bononi a bit quicker, or it could be a delayed Bononi. And what we sort of have is a King's Indian first and a sort of delayed Bononi set up later. Now, with the current structure, if I play e4, maybe I can put a knight here and then play it like a sort of perk system, maybe even consider f4 and a quick e5. But no, I steered into King's Indian defence waters. But with this c5 already, it's less attractive now to kind of play say a Simish formation, because black can just undermine like this quite easily that c4 pawn, and the diagonal is clear for the bishop. And maybe later again, e6, ed, and that semi-open file is going to be a useful trump card to generate as well. So I'm a bit wary about this position as white in the King's Indian perspective. What sort of King's Indian defence variation do I want? Well, last week he lost to one of my fellow teammates, Yarrow, who played a sort of bishop g5 kind of Averbach system. So I thought, maybe I should try something like that. So here I played e4, and after knight f6, I thought, well, he has got the option of a delayed Bononi structure with e6 later. What sort of King's Indian do I want here? Do I want to play knight f3, bishop e2? I wasn't sure, so I played bishop g5. According to chessgames.com, this has good. This has been played before, with the idea that does he want to chase this bishop? He's creating some weaknesses if he chases the bishop. Structurally, okay. If black does play like this, then the e5 square is more difficult, kind of. To kick a knight away, usually. With f4, there's always the benefit that you can roll on with e5. But if black chooses that Bononi transaction of e6, ed, then e5 might be more useful to black than usual. Now here, after bishop g5, he wasn't tempted for h6 actually. And if he castled, I thought I'd have a comfortable ride actually with queen d2. Maybe exchange off bishops as an option. Or even just play a bit like Yarrow, bishop e2, and maybe h4 later aggressively, so like that as well. But no, actually he kind of put a spanner in the works pretty soon. After bishop g5, he plays queen a5. So already, of course, tactically he's threatening knight takes e4 because of this pin on the knight. So I have to do something about that. So I play queen d2, which is aligned to my plans anyway. That maybe later bishop h6. Now he castles. I can't play bishop h6 here, of course, because he would just, for example, take, and then knight takes e4 again. So the queen's useful on a5. It's restricting some of my options. I thought I'd support e4 with this next move, bishop d3, and maybe deploy the knight to e2 now, and then maybe to g3 later. I was a bit wary about castling queenside, because this is kind of a ready-made attack for black if I castle queenside. But now he does go into a kind of Bononi structure with e6. Now with the Bononi structure, a classic weakness is d6, and usually white's taking the c pawn and giving black, pressure against e4, as well as a rolling queenside pawn majority. So I thought, actually, I'm going to throw a spanner in his works. I'm going to take with my e pawn. I've seen this before, and sometimes I've seen some white wins. It's difficult for black to sort of get something if both sides are now sharing this e file. White can still maybe target d6 without such interesting counterplay from black. So rook e8, and now after castles, I think he might have blundered here with his next move. Really, I was looking forward to a comfortable kind of attacking game. Whoops, very bad weather today and very dark and miserable. So knight g3, I hope that doesn't come out in my annotation for this game. I thought knight g3, maybe even on the card later, h3, and maybe even f4, f5, but one has to be wary about the e5 square. If the knight pops into e5 and you committed your f pawn to f5, then it's going to be a permanent guest on the e5 square. He does target the e5 square now, though, with knight g4, and I thought, okay, is he getting a comfortable position? What's the queen really doing over here? I noticed this weakness. I thought, hang on a sec, hasn't he overlooked something here? And I thought this was a neat tactical idea to play knight b5, because I'm not only attacking his queen, inviting a queen exchange, but I thought, how does he defend d6 after that? I thought that would be unpleasant, because say queen takes d2 here, bishop takes. Now there is knight e5, which is annoying indeed, and in fact I might actually be worse in these variations. So this is something analysed earlier. Say knight takes d6, rook d8. I've got two pieces hanging. Say knight takes c8, knight takes d3. Check, king f8. I've got a piece hanging. So he'd be better here. This wouldn't be that good at all. Probably, he's better here, most certainly. So I'm glad that didn't happen in the game, actually. He played an inferior move here. I think queen takes d2 objectively is the best move. Let's just engine check this position again. Queen takes d2 is objectively the best move. He played perhaps an inferior move, queen b6. So queen takes d2, bishop takes d2, so I'm eyeing d6. So let's go with knight e5, attacking the d3 bishop. So if the bishop moves sort of collapse with knight takes c4, one would imagine a little bit. But there is this knight c7 as well. But knight c7, you might be wondering, let's just rule this out. Knight c7, I win that rook, but he's getting a lot of compensation here. So say knight takes b2, it's barely an advantage for white. Bishop g4, it's barely an advantage winning that exchange like that. Barely, as you see from that. Let's go 1 minus just to have two key variations. It's not much to write home about. So really, it's good, maybe he didn't play queen takes d2 and knight e5. I think that's one of his best bets. This next move really gave me a chance in this position. Now, here is a more abstract discussion, as possible, about quality pieces. Is this knight high quality? Is this knight and bishop high quality? Not at the moment, they're not developed yet. But this is definitely a target pawn. And the knight is actually targeting that target pawn, that weakness, that classic weakness of the Bononi structure. So one might think, well, if one has a temporarily high quality piece, and by the way, this wasn't the logic last night. The logic last night was more broad about quality pieces during the game. But if one considers this as a temporarily high quality piece, then how to exploit it? Actually, my next move does meet that criteria of trying to exploit that knight. I play a seemingly absurd knight move now, depriving this knight of going backwards to the natural spot c3, because I have in mind a punishment for queen b6, which I hoped he had overlooked. And it also satisfies this idea of doing something about knight e5 if this bishop can be given some other options like the e2 square. So what I play is knight ec3, and actually my threat here is now, believe it or not, knight a4, because then queen a6, there's knight c7. Queen can't actually go back to d8. I actually thought he's in a spot of bother here in this position. I was getting a little bit excited after knight ec3. So white's advantage technically is okay, and he makes it a lot worse than it needed to be. Bishop d7 apparently, or h6. What he plays looks ugly and was ugly, f6, and I didn't properly exploit the temporarily good quality piece attacking that pawn. If this knight's evicted back and I've taken away its natural retreat square, it's going to be dim on the rim here, as they say. A knight on the rim is dim, so it's going to be kicked back later and it's going to be a dim knight. But at the moment we can say this piece is temporarily high quality. But I was thinking about quality pieces, I was thinking, actually, if I get rid of that rook, you know, that's a high quality rook. My rooks are connected here, you know, they love being connected. Hi there, hi there. So I can get rid of his rook, I thought. That was the reasoning last night. But it's a less than accurate move here, because I think the key issue is maximising the benefit of the temporary quality piece, which I've also haven't done a favour by removing the reverse manoeuvre knight to c3. So not only I've deprived that knight of the reverse manoeuvre, it's eyeing d6, and here there's actually a very nice move, much stronger actually than rook e1, and I wonder if you can guess the whole concept. Actually, it will be amazing if some of you could. Let's say there's going to be about 200 to 300 points available in this video. 50 points for each move you can spot in advance. Now, don't cheat with engines. I'll give you time for each move. But how do you exploit in this position? Say you did factor in that actually, okay, although you could argue this piece is of sort of high quality, it's not really got any entrance points at the moment. There's no big deal. There's no rush to exchange it off and to sort of prove, you know, try and dominate the E file. There's actually a stronger move which comes up in engine analysis with crystal clear clarity, which is stronger than rook e1 and uses the fact that this knight is eyeing a sensitive pawn. So I wonder if you can guess what a really good move would be in this position and why. So if I give you 20 seconds now, how would you exploit the temporarily high quality knight on b5? Remember, I've deprived it of the reverse central maneuver. So the move here, if I give you 20 seconds, starting from now, what would you play? Okay, bishop f4. It actually forces, there's very limited defensive options. I suppose there's bishop f8 though, looking at this now. But then, you know, maybe knight e4, and then there's a triple, you know, pressure on d6. So bishop f4, let's say the natural knight e5 is played. Okay, and now here, can you spot a really good move for white? Still exploiting this temporary high quality knight. We could argue it's high quality at the moment, and we don't want it to go back to being less quality than what it was originally. If it's on a3, it's like a stumbling knight from the classic Karpov-Kasparov game, where Karpov had stumbling knights going backwards like this, and they were difficult to get back into the game and influence the centre. But here, black is lagging development for a moment. Things are in the docking station at the moment. They haven't taken off yet for combat. So how do you exploit this position? And d6, can you spot a really good kind of almost like a positional sacrifice? If you favour, I'll give you a big tip now. Well, certain minor pieces are favoured more by most people than other minor pieces, so that's your little tip. What would be a really, really good move here? If I give you 10 seconds starting from now, or you may want to pause the video. So again, it's the idea of trying to celebrate quickly the temporary high quality pieces of the position, particularly b5. So 10 seconds starting from now. Okay. I don't know why I didn't consider this continuation. Not even, I didn't even consider bishop f4, and so I go on an inaccuracy tangent. But this is a clinical continuation. It's a total punishment for black's setup and d6. Bishop takes e5. Whatever way black takes, black will be at disadvantage here. Let's say d takes e5. Then there's d6 using the knight on b5, which is supporting the pawn, now threatening knight c7, and also, of course, the d5 square for knight d5 would harass the queen, and all sorts of nightmares after d6. So that's out of the question. Now let's look at f takes e5, knight e4, again making use of the knight because it's eyeing d6. You know, there's no bishop f8 here without losing the exchange. This would be horrendous. Say rook d8. And a clinical continuation, a4 trying to punish the queen, you know, with a5. So say a4, now f4. This is a clinical continuation, which would definitely secure an advantage for white. Getting a big pass pawn now with this peeling. The rook useful on the f file. No need to use it on the e file. The rook's passive on d8. No need even to exchange off a set of rooks. Knight g5 in this sort of position looks exceptionally promising. This is a fictional continuation, which would be quite crushing, and it shows, you know, how much damage, you know, could be done to black. You know, takes, check, winning the queen. It's an example variation. So this example variation does celebrate the temporarily good knight, aggressive knight on b5. Now the critical one is rook takes e5, and this requires some vision because, you know, really, you know, maybe f5 and this bishop might be good later. And why have you given up the dark square bishop when that dark square bishop would have been useful for sort of, you know, rerouting and maybe targeting d6? But there's a forcing move here, which is much stronger than anything else. Stopping black using the e5 square for some time. 10 seconds, starting from now. Okay. f4. So say the rook was scurrying back. Now knight e4 is possible, targeting d6, making use of the knight. So what would black do here? It's really looking like an absolutely terrible position, just because of the knight on b5. Either rook e1 or even knight e4. Although apparently black might be able to play rook d8 here, it's not actually a huge amount technically to write home about here, apparently. Unless white follows up clinically again. Now f5, what is going on here? A positional sacrifice by the engine. Knight takes. Okay, we're going into fantasy world here, where this is apparently quite dangerous. This bishop takes f5 and stuff, so black's being forced to give back material. So it looks like a vicious attack. The queen's kind of stranded here. The knight stopping the queen, actually performing a defensive role. The queen can't get back, so there's going to be a heavy attack on the poor black king here. So that would be a great consequence of this this forcing move, to follow up f4 with f5. No, I never saw any of this, of course. And maybe, you know, one would be wary giving up the dark square bishop like this without seeing the emphatic, you know, positional sacrifices to justify it all. But the queen is kind of stranded by this knight. And if this a4 is really prompting a5, but what else is there? Because a6 execution time for the queen. a5 checkmate to the queen. So if a5 is forced, then the queen's actually stranded there. So it justifies emphasising black's king side after, if the queen's stranded there on b6. No reverse to c7 available. So anyway, this is a great continuation. A simple one would be just rook a e1. And, for example, you know, this infiltration looks very, very unpleasant for black. What would black be doing here with this infiltration if black didn't want an exchange of rooks? Say bishop d7, maybe even f5 here, or is good for an advantage. Even if the knight did have to scurry back. But more clinically, let's see, the most clinical, queen e1 apparently, queen e1. Because that actually supports queen e6 checks after rook takes d7. Whoa. Okay, a bit of machine overload, but there's a threat of rook takes d7 now, which looks kind of tasty. So say a6, actually queen e1, sorry, f5 was played for some reason. Now if king h8, f5, it looks crunching, and this bishop looks terrible. Let's say a4, a6, okay, a5, queen a5. Knight takes d6, justifying the knight on b5. So there's an urgency, there's a sense of urgency with temporarily active or aggressive, quality pieces, which I didn't really have last night. So this continuation looks really, really promising to really punish the ugliness of f6. But what happens now is like a magical transformation of the position, where actually this piece becomes really good later. This piece becomes really good on e5 later. It turns into a nightmare, a total reversal. Just one casual move, and I'm giving him almost equality now with bishop d7. Bishop d7. If you look at the engine evaluation, it drops dramatically here. I thought I was being clever with rook ae1 here, not moving the bishop, relying on what was I relying on? Well, for example, I mean, this check would be really quite tasty. But no, it's bishop 7, and actually that's a useful. Unfortunately, bishop d7 is very useful for black to because now a lot of variations knight e4 comes with bishop takes b5. So the piece quality of this b5 is now in question. It's actually a tactical liability. It's gone from being something to trying to celebrate to being a sort of liability now, and prone to being chased back into the corner. Poor thing. So bishop d7, how can black be busted here? You might think, well, this knight's a bit loose, maybe this continuation, which is brought up by the engine with queen e2 or something. Bishop d7, let's say. And again, the advantage has dissipated, it seems, to a large degree here. Because knight e4, now there's bishop takes b5 in this continuation. The advantage is clearly dissipated, but still, this is better than the game continuation, because black hasn't got the e5 square, got a beautiful knight on e4 for the moment. It is an advantage to white, and that's much better than the game continuation. Doesn't really matter so much about the double pawns. So let's go back how the game advantage really massively dissipated after rook e1. Bishop d7. Okay, yes, I'm reminded of to capture is like to. There's a grandmaster about not capturing blows your advantages and untangles the opponent. Well, it sort of did here, because now rook e1, and he just protects the bishop. The knights are heading for the beautiful e5 square. I played bishop h4. The poor knight on b5 is far from being celebrated. It's been evicted into the corner. After knight ge5, now he's threatening knight takes d3 and potentially queen b2, justifying even the pesky queen on b6. And things are about to get things are about to get a lot worse now in just two moves. With my next move, I really just get really annoyed with the transformation now of position. Absolutely annoyed. I play bishop e2. And that bishop, which I thought was accidentally kind of placed on d7 as an emergency, is now kind of doing a magical French defence manoeuvre to g6 after g5. So not only g5 discourages any f4s, pushes my bishop now into a kind of biting on granite scenario. After this poor guy, this poor knight was tortured on a3, this bishop is now a similar fate. Black's pieces now are all magically placed after bishop g6. I thought I was disgusted here. I thought, what have I done? Surely I had something earlier and it's all just gone. Why has my position gone to this? I've just justified everything about the opponent's play. Completely justified. And I'm for a draw, to be honest. It's only move 20. I just don't like my position here. I've given him a really strong position. He's not only equalised, black is probably better here. Although the engine seems to think it's about equal. Say I tried to chip away. I thought maybe just H6, you know, just H6. What's the matter with H6? This can't be very convincing. It's about equal anyway. But it seems black has established everything he wanted at the opening. And this bishop and knight coordinating, I can't even play contest d3. I can't really evict this knight. I just didn't like this. And this one isn't inspiring great confidence in the position. So I offered a draw, and it was accepted. Actually, I thought he'd play on and try and torture me and crush me like he once did in the British, but no, he accepted the draw. I just felt I was trying to track piece quality in this game, and it all went to pieces. And so maybe, just maybe, there's something that can be gleaned from this anyway, which is about temporary piece quality, trying to make the most out of temporary piece quality. And if that's a knight you've stuck on b5, which you've also deprived of a retreat square, a natural retreat square to the centre, then really, if you can try and justify the knight on b5, you know, it might be worth spending considerable time in the position. Here, it was seemingly a clever idea, this knight b5. By the way, what I didn't show you in this position were slightly better alternatives if this had occurred. That maybe knight c1, because it still has the threat now of d6 and knight. This might be okay for white, because I'm winning the exchange for a pawn, but it should be okay. Say bishop f5. Okay, I'll be winning the exchange, and it should be a small advantage for white. So what really happened is I'm having to justify quite fiercely the knight on b5. I've stopped it going reverse. It's going to be decentralized, but for this one moment, temporarily, in this moment of time, this knight on b5 needs to be justified. It's attacking the vulnerable d6 pawn of black's position, and there so happens to be after knight ec3, which is a nice move, an incisive move almost, because it's threatening knight a4, sort of justifying b5, but at the same time depriving the retreat. So once going forward, in this scenario, one must keep going forward, and the way to do that here was to play bishop after f6, which satisfies the requirement of giving queen d8 possible to knight a4. So the idea of bishop f4, I think, is absolutely logical, to try and exploit to the maximum the temporarily placed aggressive piece, which is now committed on b5 without a natural retreat square, and to play this instead of the seemingly routine, stereotypical, just casually trying to get rid of the rook, which really, you know, that rook can be forced into a defensive role to protect d6 instead, and this rook can be left on f1 to try and blast a hole through black's king side, through black's king position in these variations. So rook ae1 is letting black off the hook here, believe it or not. The key thing about this position is this knight on b5. I think you will agree. But it's from engine analysis. I'm just making, you know, the abstraction. I'm trying to qualify my own generalizations about piece quality, about temporary piece quality, more permanent, and more committed pieces. And here it seems the key thing is the d6 pawn, to kind of, you know, just take off that knight, stop black using the e5 square as well with this f4, and then, you know, pounce on d6 here. This sort of stuff, the queen, if one observed this position, is locked out from defending the king here. So a move like a4 is also justifying the knight, because it's taking away a7 or c7 as retreat squares. The rook is now taking away that retreat square. So this ganging up on d6 has major side effects for making sure black's pieces are over here and the king's over there. And this could have been absolutely a beautiful game, like this, or even, you know, maybe just even just knight g3. I assume black's going to have difficulty defending, even without a computer clinical continuation. Even with knight g3, if you get a kind of Kasparov knight to f5, it's going to be difficult, surely, for black to defend this position, because these pieces are all miserable. Look at this, the advantage is creeping up for white. Although, you know, it seems, okay, black can be given back, you know, an e5 square. This looks like really dangerous territory for black to try and defend. Say knight e7 here, or just taking. We'll end up with much better pieces here than black's pieces, potentially. Okay, the knight can go back to there, and then, you know, winning this one. It's just an example variation. It's far from the game, but the key premise I think to glean from this is about temporary piece quality, exploiting temporary piece quality, which I didn't do with the more casual continuation of rook e1. So this is all really good stuff to force that e8 rook to do something defensive rather than exchange it off. So I guess, you know, I have simplified black's task by taking off some pieces rather than forcing them on the defensive, and using their defensive roles to go for the black king. That's much more tension in the position, much more complexity, and black's defensive task is huge here. So that's really quite interesting. But rook e1 as well as knight e4 is also apparently even stronger. Even here, if okay, let's take bishop d7 here. This e-file control could actually play a valuable part as well. Maybe queen e2, queen e6 check, and then winning d6. You know, d6 is a weakness, like in the Bononi. It can be targeted, but it all stems from this knight doing a lot of damage in these variations. But it wasn't allowed to do persistent, you know, maximum damage, because it had to scurry back soon with a6 being played by black. So it all starts, basically the key move in the jigsaw here, before it all started going wrong, I believe bishop f4. And it's just magical how black's pieces all came on very good squares now. Even this bishop on c8 is having a really good time in the game continuation. So in the game continuation, rook e1, the bishop's rerouting like a sort of French defence to a beautiful diagonal. The knights are getting secure on e5 because of that g5, and black's got all the play. I'll just be passive here. So I don't know what to say. I hope you got something instructive from it. I think I have, about trying to make the most out of committed pieces, temporarily high quality pieces. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.